Hey guys, tonight we're peeling back the velvet curtain of history, and behind it is a year the world would rather forget. A year when the sky dimmed and never quite brightened again. The year is 536. The sun rises, but its light feels tired. The air smells of wet ash and wilted grain, and each morning carries the kind of cold that settles not just in your bones, but in your memory. The sky has forgotten its color, not black, not gray, just a muted, tired white, as if the sun is trying to shine through old linen. You wake up wrapped in scratchy wool, your breath rising in soft clouds above your lips. In May. Outside, the fields lie still. The barley won't grow. Even the birds seem unsure if it's time to sing. A thin smoke creeps from cold hearths, mixing with something stranger in the air. A dryness that doesn't lift, a fog that doesn't smell like rain. And in the village square, people speak in whispers, not out of reverence, but uncertainty, because no one knows why the days are dim, or if they'll ever brighten again. If this slow unraveling of history, this soft descent into dim skies and colder days, is something your weary mind finds strangely comforting, then feel free to like. Maybe subscribe to my channel, but only if it truly fits your rhythm. And tell us if you'd like. Where are you watching from tonight? And what time is it where you are? There's a kind of quiet magic in drifting off together, to the same ancient shadows from different corners of the world. Now, let's set the mood. If you haven't already, go ahead and dim the lights. Let your room soften. Turn on a fan for that low mechanical hum, like distant wind across a winter plain. Let your hands go still. Let your thoughts slow. You're not rushing into this story. You're drifting. Down through layers of time and silence. Let the modern world fall away. Its noise, its light, its calendars that always make sense.
Part 1. The year without a sunrise. The mornings come slowly now, not with golden light or the chirp of birds, but with a heavy greyness that seeps in under the door like smoke. You rise, but the sky does not. Outside, the village feels paused, like someone pressed a finger against the horizon and told it to wait. At first, people think it's just a strange fog, a handful of cloudy days, the kind that makes everything smell like wet straw and soot. Farmers mutter. Children squint. No one panics, not yet. But then a week passes, then 2. The dimness doesn't lift. The sun, if it's even up there, shines like a dying lantern behind waxed parchment, and every hour feels like dusk just before a storm that never comes. Time begins to lose its shape. There is no real morning, no real night, just variations of shadow. Even the animals seem disoriented. Chickens lay late, cows move slower, roosters crow at the wrong hour, and sometimes not at all. They adapt in small ways. Candles are lit before noon. Oil lamps flicker longer, but fat is hard to come by, and beeswax, well, that belongs to the church. Meals shift to whatever doesn't rot. Pickled cabbage, cold roots dug up from a season no one can name. Work begins later, ends earlier, and some villagers stop going outside altogether. They sit near their hearths with wool wrapped twice around their shoulders, and their thoughts wrapped 3 times around their fears. The elders say it's a curse. The priests say it's a reckoning. The young say nothing. They've never seen a bright day. Not really. And already they stop asking why. But this new twilight isn't free. Crops hesitate. Barley turns yellow before it ripens. Wheat sprouts, then shrivels, unsure of the season. The ground feels colder than usual. Not frozen, just unfriendly. Livestock grow restless. They wander in circles, graze its breath for far too long. You'd get more light from the bottom of a soup pot, more warmth from a disgruntled candle. And so the days continue. Not as a march forward, but as a loop, an echo, where nothing feels new and everything feels vaguely wrong.
And this, you realize, is only the beginning. The sun hasn't vanished, it's just stopped trying. And soon, the harvest will too. And as the days drag on, with the light still hiding and the warmth still missing, the ground begins to wonder, should it even bother growing anything at all?
Part 2. When the earth stopped answering. You dig your fingers into the soil. It's damp, but not in the right way. Not spring damp, not fertile or fragrant, just heavy, like it's forgotten how to breathe. No one knows when to plant anymore. The sky offers no cues. The air is cold in the morning, colder by dusk, and sometimes, even in what's supposed to be summer, you wake to frost on the inside of your door. So the farmers do what they can. They guess, they hope. They dig shallow trenches in silent fields and tuck seeds into the ground like letters addressed to a god who stopped reading. They watch the animals, the color of moss, the way the clouds move or don't. Some carry scraps of old calendars like prayer scrolls. Others whisper to the soil before dropping in each seed, as if apologizing for the inconvenience. Even the experienced hands hesitate. They've plowed these lands for 40 seasons, but now the dirt feels foreign, harder, hungrier, and quieter than it should be. There's no scent of growth, no bird call at dawn, no buzzing of flies in the heat, because there is no heat, just grey, just chill, just silence and the sound of hope being buried an inch too deep. Still, the planting happens, because not planting means starving for certain. Even if your gut says it's the wrong time, even if your fingers ache from the cold, even if the seeds feel like tiny lies slipping through your hands. And sometimes, something grows. A few green shoots, a trembling row of barley, hope thin as thread, tied to a single leaf. But the cold returns, or the rains forget their job, or the sun never shows up for work, and the crops fold in on themselves, quietly, like someone giving up without saying a word. The harvest, when it comes, is more of a suggestion. One family pulls 5 potatoes from a 1/4 acre. Another boils the same turnip for 3 nights in a row. Forget what abundance looked like, what full baskets felt like, what it meant to leave food on the table, and soon, the hunger that started in the fields will find its way into homes, into kitchens, into markets, into the hollow space between people, where trust used to be, where warmth used to live. That's where we're headed next, not into the wilderness, but deeper into the village, where the cold wears a human face, and scarcity has a sound. It starts small, a missing loaf, a closed window, a silence that wasn't there before. But it grows, like all things left unchecked, and all across the village, you begin to hear a new kind of silence. Not the silence of winter, not the silence of waiting, but the silence that comes when people start holding things back. Part 3. Hunger wears a human face. It doesn't begin with shouting, or theft, or locked doors. It begins with little things. A pot left uncovered, but only when the neighbors are watching. A loaf of bread cut just a bit smaller than usual, and offered with a smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. There's still food, for now, but it no longer moves freely. A few families begin keeping track, not of what they have, but of what others don't. They still nod in the streets, but the nods are shorter, stiffer. They still share firewood, but not the fat from the broth. The market grows quieter, fewer stalls, fewer coins. More eyes watching hands, counting loaves, measuring turnips like treasure. The baker speaks less, the miller locks his shed, and the old woman who used to trade herbs for stories now wants something more practical, something edible, something that keeps. Rumors begin to trickle in.
like smoke from a house too far to help. Another village 2 days north has closed its gates. A road patrol found carts overturned in the fog, bread spilled in the mud, but no footprints. One trader says a town nearby started using stones to weigh their bread, not to cheat, just to make it look full. And the silence spreads. It's not empty. It's full of unasked questions, unoffered help, unspoken fears. You start to notice things. How your neighbor's chimney hasn't smoked in days. How the boy next door stopped coming to collect water. How the woman who used to hum while sweeping now moves like a shadow across her doorstep. People don't say they're hungry. They say they're saving. They say they're adjusting. They say it's just a colder year. But their eyes say otherwise. At night you hear coughing through the walls, not the sick kind, the hollow kind. The kind your stomach... Part 5. The cost of staying human. There's a moment in every famine when the hunger shifts, when it stops gnawing just at your stomach and starts whispering to your sense of right and wrong. It begins small, as always, a piece of bread tucked away instead of being split, a second helping, quietly taken before asking, a spoon licked clean just a little too quickly. You tell yourself it's nothing. You were tired, distracted. You'll make up for it tomorrow. But tomorrow doesn't come the way it used to. One day, a mother feeds her youngest child a full portion. She says it's because he's still growing, because the others can manage. Because he cried last night and she couldn't take it anymore. The others say nothing, but their silence stays in the room long after the bowl is empty. In another home, a boy hides a dried apple, not for himself, for his sister, or so he says. But that sister hasn't eaten in 2 days, and the apple is still whole. And in the quiet corners of the village, there are choices being made that no one ever speaks of. A door left unlocked by someone too weak to care. A cellar raided by someone who said grace before stealing. A man who trades a silver ring, a wedding gift, for a single salted fish. He eats it alone, in the woods, and buries the bones so no one will know. What does it mean to stay human, when the rules of humanity no longer serve survival? Is kindness still kindness if it kills you? Is selfishness still a sin if it's the reason your child wakes up tomorrow? The village doesn't talk about these questions. Not openly, not loudly, but they live in every glance, every gesture, every delayed answer to a simple request. One morning, someone knocks on your door. They don't ask for food. They ask for fire. Just a little coal, enough to keep a baby warm. You hesitate, not because you don't want to help, but because your own hearth is already fading. You give them a handful anyway, and smile. But all day, you wonder if it was hunger is the guilt. The shame of wanting to live a little more than you want to be good. The shame of hoping someone else will say no, so you don't have to. You begin to bargain with yourself. I'll share tomorrow. I'll pray extra. I'll forget this ever happened. But your body doesn't listen. Your breath comes slower. Your legs lose heat. Your heart, still beating, still alive, starts asking, what are we still keeping warm for? And yet, some still choose kindness, even now, even here. A woman gives up her portion so an old man won't fall asleep too early. A father tells stories at night to distract his children from the ache in their bellies. 2 boys find a squirrel, and instead of hiding it, they share it with the house next door. No one thanks them, but they do it anyway. Because somewhere, deep down, something inside them refuses to dim. Not yet. That kindness has a cost. One of those boys doesn't wake up the next morning. The woman who gave up her stew starts coughing and doesn't stop. And the father? He runs out of stories before he runs out of nights. So you ask yourself again, what does it mean to stay human? Is it giving? Or surviving? Is it remembering who you used to be? Or doing what must be done so you can remember anything at all? And then comes the day you find yourself staring at someone's food. Not in admiration, not in envy, just calculating. And that's when you realize the hunger isn't just in your belly anymore. It's in your eyes, your breath, your hands. And in that moment, you remember the question no one asks out loud anymore. If you lose your compassion to survive, what exactly survives? The world stays dim, and the fire inside flickers just a little lower. But somewhere, whether in you or beside you, a line is being drawn. Not between good and bad, but between what you can live with and what you can't forget. Part 6. What survives the darkness? Not all endings arrive with a sound. Some simply stop. Like a candle running out of wick, like a breath forgotten, like the final snowflake that falls and never melts. The worst of it, they say, is over. That's what they whisper now. That the skies might clear, that the sun might return, that the hunger will fade eventually. But no one cheers. No one celebrates. Because what comes after is not relief, but reckoning. The sun begins to peek through again. Not golden, not warm, but visible. A faint disk behind tattered clouds, as if it's ashamed to show its full face. The world doesn't brighten, it just stops getting darker. And when you walk outside now, there are fewer footprints in the snow, fewer chimneys smoking, fewer voices, fewer names being called. The village is quieter, not by choice, but by subtraction. Some homes are empty, doors left ajar, beds still made. No signs of struggle, just absence. Others remain closed, with a silence too heavy to knock upon. And you don't. You've learned. If there's no smoke by noon, you simply move on. The hunger doesn't leave all at once. It lingers in the bones, in the brittle nails, in the way people chew slowly, not from manners but disbelief. A full bowl now feels suspicious, as if joy needs to be earned back inch by inch. Children who once laughed now watch. Eyes too old, movements too careful. They speak in half sentences, eat in half bites. They know how to stretch broth, how to not cry, how to make one potato last 3 days. They shouldn't know, but they do. People begin to talk again, softly. Stories return, not of heroes, but of who survived. That's not even funny. And no one tells them to stop, because that too is a kind of returning. What survives the darkness isn't what you expect. Not strength, not faith, not certainty, but the willingness to still reach out, even with shaking hands. The whisper of a song with no words. The planting of a seed with no promise. The closing of a door with care. And maybe that's enough. Not to undo the famine, not to erase the silence, but to be here, to stay, to begin again in the soft, unsure light of something almost like morning. And just as the earth begins to thaw, and the air tastes faintly of beginnings, you realize surviving was never the end. The real work is learning how to live again. Part 7. Rebuilding what was lost. You don't rebuild all at once. You start small, always small. A broom sweeps a floor that hasn't felt footsteps in weeks. A door is lifted back onto its hinges without ceremony. A spoon clinks gently into a pot of something that finally smells like food. No trumpets, no announcements, just life in tiny, quiet pieces. The snow has melted, but the scars it left behind take longer to thaw. The fields don't trust the sun yet, and neither do the people. You walk differently now, not with fear, but with memory. You remember the winter, the silence, the choices. You don't talk about it much, but it's in your hands, your voice, the way you fold a blanket as if it might be needed again too soon. Some houses never open again. Some names stop being said out loud. But new names come. New steps on old roads. New laughter, softer but real. A child is born, and no one names her after the dead. Instead, they name her after the river, because it kept moving when everything else stood still. You learn to sow again, not just seeds, but trust. It takes longer. A neighbor offers you onions. You offer bread. No one speaks of balance. But something is restored in the giving. The priest says fewer words now, but when he speaks, they land heavier. Not in guilt, but in reverence. He no longer blesses the harvest. He blesses the hands that dared to plant again. There are moments of light, a roof that doesn't leak, a garden that surprises you with green, the sound of music, badly played but honest, on a stringed instrument found under a bed. It's out of tune, so are the people, but somehow that makes the song truer. Not everyone returns to who they were. Some choose silence, some choose distance. Some choose to leave altogether. You understand, you don't blame them. After all, this place didn't just hollow out. Call it hope, call it grace, call it the quiet, steady pulse of what it means to be human after the breaking. You touch the soil. It's warm again, not just from the sun, but from your hands. And this time, when you plant, you do it without fear, just care and patience and love. And as the village exhales, slow, uncertain, but alive, you begin to wonder, what else has the world remembered, while you were just trying to survive? Part 8. The world after the fog. It starts with a story, not one you tell, but one you hear. A traveller, wrapped in wool, face half lost behind a scarf. He speaks slowly, as if his tongue forgot how language works in the cold, but his voice cuts through like spring air in a sealed room. He says, the cities survived, some of them. Not well, not clean, but they're there. He says, the mountains changed, whole roads swallowed, villages erased without screams, just silence. He says, the sea turned cruel for a while, then quiet, and now, strangely kind. No one believes him, not at first, but they listen. He brings strange seeds, worn coins, cloth dyed in colors no one here remembers. He speaks of people who lived underground for 2 winters, of forests that moved, of skies that turned red for 7 days straight. He laughs, but not because it's funny, because it's over, and slowly, your world grows again, not in fields, not in markets, but in imagination. You begin to ask questions you forgot you used to care about. What happened in the cities? Did kings survive? Did the monks finish copying the books? Did the stars change? Are there others who also made it but never stopped walking? Maps are unrolled. Most of them don't make sense anymore. Rivers have moved, borders forgotten, whole kingdoms erased like chalk beneath rain. But still, you look. You trace roads with your finger, not to follow them, not yet, just to remember that they're there. You start to write again, not just to record, but to reach. A letter, wrapped in cloth, left with a traveller. No address, just hope, And hope, as it turns out, has legs. More people arrive. Not many, but enough. A woman with a wagon full of books, damp but legible. A man who makes music from a hollowed gourd and horsehair. A boy who speaks 3 languages but forgot his own name. They don't stay, but they leave stories, and stories like...
No one says let's do it. No votes, no plans. Just hands picking up stones, clearing brush, sketching blueprints in dirt. Because maybe the world doesn't need to return. Maybe it just needs to continue. You find yourself smiling without reason. Not wide, not loud, just soft. Because the fog has lifted. Not all at once, but enough to see where your feet can go next. You still miss things, still mourn, still have nights where the air feels too heavy to breathe. But you wake up and rise and step forward. Because now, the world is watching again. Not with judgment, not with memory, but with curiosity. And maybe, just maybe, it's ready to meet you as something new. Part 9. What we choose to forget. You can survive a storm. You can survive hunger. You can even survive the loss of those you love. But the hardest thing to survive is forgetting why it mattered. Time is strange after the end of the world. There's no longer a before or after, just layers. What you remember, what you let go, what you reshape so it hurts a little less. People stop telling stories about the famine, not because it wasn't real, but because it's too real. It's easier now to talk about the rebuilding, the victories, the new ideas, the new homes. And slowly, a new kind of silence returns, not from hunger, but from comfort. Children ask fewer questions. They weren't there. They only know that once everything stopped, and then everything started again. To them it's a fable, a bedtime myth, something that happened to those people in that time, not to the hands that feed them now. You try to tell the truth once, about the cold, the fear, the choice you made to keep your last crust of bread when someone else was crying. But halfway through, you stop. Not because it hurts, but because their eyes don't understand it. And that feels worse. So you keep it to yourself. You fold it into your bones. You press it into your hands as you plant each season. You carry it in silence and call it strength. The new world is beautiful, cleaner, kinder sometimes, more thoughtful. People talk of fairness, of design, of learning from the past. But no one ever asks how close we came to becoming something else entirely. Something we might not have come back from. Some say forgetting is mercy, that memory is a weight too heavy to carry forever. They build gardens over burial grounds, monuments without names, festivals that celebrate the return of spring, but never meant only ink on paper in a drawer no one may open. And maybe this is the lesson that no rebuilding teaches fast enough. When we forget what broke us, we forget what kept us human too. The world keeps moving. It should. The trees bloom again. New songs are sung. Babies are born who will never know hunger. You do not wish them fear, only memory. The quiet kind. The useful kind. The kind that hums just beneath the surface, like roots beneath thawed earth. And one day, someone may ask again, what happened? How did we survive? Who made the choices that brought us back? And when they ask,
you'll have something to say. Not perfectly, not heroically, but honestly. Because forgetting may be a kind of healing, but remembering, gently, truthfully, is a kind of keeping. And what we keep becomes who we are. The fog may have lifted. The fields may have returned. But somewhere still, one question waits. What if it comes again? And this time, will we be ready? Part 11. The Quiet Revolution. It doesn't begin with fire, or flags, or speeches from tall wooden platforms. It begins in silence, the kind you find between words, or in the soft breath someone takes before admitting they were wrong. Because change, true change, never arrives shouting. It slips in like fog, settles into the cracks of habit, and waits. The quiet revolution begins with remembering, but not the kind that breaks you, the kind that asks, what now? What can we do differently? And then, what are we willing to let go of so that something else can live? Not everyone sees it happening. Most don't, because it wears no uniform, it raises no banners. It walks in everyday clothes and speaks with the voice of your neighbor when they say, maybe we could try another way. You see it when the market begins trading hours for bread, not just coin. You see it when the school teaches not only how to read, but how to listen. You see it when meetings end not with votes, but with shared silence, until a decision feels right in the body, not just the mind. There is no manifesto, no great theory, just people, moving slower, choosing kinder, asking more beautiful questions, like, what if success was measured in how many people you could hold, not how much you could hold on to? Or, what if growth wasn't bigger, but deeper? And, what if safety wasn't walls, but trust? The world does not shift all at once. Of course it doesn't. There are still those who scoff, who cling to the old logic of scarcity, of competition, of power that hoards, but power is not what it used to be. And fear no longer grows so easily in well-lit places. Because now, when fear arrives, it is met with listening, with a bowl of soup, with someone sitting beside it saying, I've been afraid too. This is the revolution. Not the ending of something, but the tending of something fragile and persistent. It is gardens planted in old parking lots. It is libraries built from salvaged stone. They draw maps not of land, but of care, of networks, of knowledge, of who needs what and who has something to give. And slowly, so slowly, a new kind of structure rises, one without a center, one that does not collapse when one part falls, because it isn't built from stone, but from connection. They stop asking who is in charge and start asking what needs to be done. Who has the hands for it today? It is not perfect. It never will be. There are arguments, disagreements, missteps, but there is also repair, apology, growth, because they understand. This time, progress is not the absence of failure, but the willingness to walk through failure together. They create rooms for grieving, not just celebrating. They hold space for the quiet ones to speak in their own time. They learn how to cook meals that stretch, not because they must, but because generosity has become a skill again. And when someone says, this is how we used to do it, they do not scoff. They ask, did it bring you closer to others or further apart? They don't measure success by survival anymore, but by tenderness, by how often someone says, I feel safe here. This too is revolution. It just wears softer clothes. One day, a visitor arrives, from far away, still wearing the sharpness of a world that hasn't yet turned its face fully toward this way of being. They ask, where is your leader? The villagers smile, not smugly, not evasively. They simply say, today it's Anna. Yesterday it was two others. Tomorrow, we'll see who listens best. The visitor laughs, uncomfortable. But who decides? And they answer, we do, together, until it feels right. Not efficient, not fast, but true. This is not utopia. There are still losses, still cold nights, still old fears that rattle the windows when the wind shifts. But the Part 12, Inheritance. It doesn't begin with words, it begins with hands, a bowl passed from one generation to the next, a tool worn smooth where thousands of fingers once gripped, a melody hummed quietly during the morning fire. This is what they inherit now. Not gold, not crowns, not names carved into stone, but use, and memory, and care. The world that broke apart did not leave behind wealth. It left behind wisdom. And wisdom is not loud. It does not arrive in declarations. It does not sit in museums. It lives in motion, in daily repetition, in rituals too small to notice until they're gone. A young boy learns to mend boots from someone who once walked barefoot through frost. A girl learns to measure a winter's worth by the shape of clouds, not by numbers on a calendar. Children are taught that silence is not always absence, but sometimes reverence. They are told the old stories, not just the ones about monsters and kings, but the ones where no one wins, where the lesson is simply continue. They inherit a world still healing, but also a world more honest, one where grief has a place at the table, when the stakes are named, where no one pretends the past was gentle. And in that honesty, there is room for tenderness. Because now, love isn't performance, it's presence. A pot kept warm just in case. A wall repaired before anyone asked. A quiet touch on the shoulder when someone forgets the words to explain what hurts. This too is inheritance, and perhaps the most powerful kind. The kind that teaches you do not need to suffer to be worthy. You do not need to struggle to belong. That survival is not a badge to be polished, but a path to be softened for those who come next. The elders begin to pass on more than stories. They pass on ways. The way to knead dough with one hand while holding a crying child in the other. The way to read someone's face before they speak. The way to leave something behind without need. Stone and pine. They are taught to observe, not just to see, but to notice. A leaning fence post that needs fixing. A neighbor who hasn't been by in a while. The first frost in the tips of the grass. And more than anything, they are taught to listen. Not to authority, but to experience. To the stories in hands. To the songs that shift slightly each time they're sung. To the pauses between what is said and what is meant. Because this is how the world is held. Not in plans, not in control, but in the tension. Inheritance becomes a living thing, not passed down but grown into. The next generation builds upon what remains, not to replace it, but to continue it. They build walls where needed, and leave space where not. They add verses to old lullabies. They write new footnotes to old recipes. Nothing is sacred because it is old. It is sacred because it's served. And when it no longer serves, it is blessed, then let go. Even that is part of inheritance, to know what to carry forward and what to lay gently down. So the world continues, not faster, not richer, but deeper. And this time, when a child is born, no one says, "What legacy will they leave?" They say, "What love will they inherit?" And that love is not abstract. It is warmth. It is structure. It is a hand extended before the stumble. It is the teaching of when to harvest and when to rest. It is the trust that there will still be stories to lean on when your own strength falters. Because we do not only pass down what we made, we pass down how we endured, how we kept singing when our voices cracked, how we kept planting when the soil looked bare, how we kept loving when the world felt unrecognizable. The next generation does not need to be protected from the truth. They need to be trusted with it, because in the truth, they will find their own courage, their own rhythm, their own way. You've walked a long way with us, through ashes, through silence, through seed and song and second chances. You've listened to grief without turning away. You've sat in stillness, and maybe, just maybe, you remembered something you didn't know you'd forgotten. And now, the fire is low, the night is quiet, and all that's left is breath. Yours, ours, the world's. Let that be enough. For now. Let your body rest knowing that somewhere someone is keeping watch. Someone is carrying memory. Someone is building gently for the morning you will rise into. You don't need to carry the whole story, just your part, and let that be more than enough. So sleep, softly, quietly, without fear. We've made it this far, together, and that is a kind of miracle. Good night. You are safe, and the story will still be here when you wake. If you'd like to walk a little further with us next time, feel free to like this video. Maybe subscribe to my channel, only if it feels right in your quiet heart. We're here, waiting, whenever you are.